First story. A friend sent his husband a hidden camera recording of his wife cheating on him with a famous singer. Terrifying revenge for cheating. Watch it all the way to the end, you won't regret it. I have heard amazing stories of adultery more than once or twice, but I never thought I would be in their shoes. I still don't understand how that happened. My wife has never required anything, according to appearances, and I appear to make a respectable living. Yes, in theory, and my intimate life has always been at a high level, or so it has previously seemed to me. One thing happens as a result: my wife starts to walk and my horns start to scratch the ceiling. Where did everything begin? Random encounters or discussions have frequently occurred in my life and drastically altered the course of my entire existence. I owe my professional success and useful relationships outside of work to them. This time, the situation was much the same. I frequently do this to give my brain a little vacation during my lunch break as I leisurely strolled across the city and casually turned my head in the direction of a neighboring restaurant. What was there that I saw? It goes without saying that my wife is with his ex-boyfriend. I nearly lost my footing, even with my eyes somewhat obscured by the onslaught of feelings. I collected myself after a few moments, determined it wouldn't be too hot to wait until nightfall, and decided to finally put an end to the problem. I most definitely wouldn't allow someone to get me horny. I eventually made it to my workplace, where I started to wait in a frenzy for the conclusion of the workday, because there was going to be a fairly serious conversation had something to start it. In this brief period of time, I more or less managed to calm my nerves. But I had no idea what a true performance would be in these kinds of situations. Accused his wife of infidelity right away. What if she simply met her ex by chance in a restaurant? But given that the restaurant was located 10 kilometers from our home at the opposite end of the city, what was she to do there? There were many unanswered questions, therefore it was important to choose the best answer in order to get the complete truth. Finally, the workday came to an end. I got in my car and slowly made my way home while thinking about everything in a delirious manner. I didn't even realize how far I had traveled. I was now at home. I sat for a while before getting up to go. My wife threw herself into my arms from the threshold, as she always did. I slowly backed away and calmly entered the kitchen before sitting down at the dining room table and requesting my wife make me some coffee. This is how I usually end my day at the workplace. She followed my instructions as if nothing had happened. So I inquired as to her day's activities and any recent events. My wife lied calmly and in front of my eyes that she had gone to the store with friends and purchased a few new blouses without even flinching. Yes, because of this kind of snobbery, I almost fell off the chair there. It must be able to be so bold as to lie and not blush. Then it occurred to me that we should gather incriminating proof before dumping all the wives. I thus made that choice. I sneaked out the following morning and snatched Rocker's keys. I unlocked it and placed the cover recorder in a private location. What? It would provide a sizable body of proof. Following our breakfast together, I went to work as usual. Such a tight pace carried on for 3 days. The work piled up so much that I nearly forgot about the event with his wife, as if by coincidence. But as the long-awaited weekend finally arrived, I made the decision to check the recorder. I watched that while almost shaking my hands. My worst concerns came true as I had expected. How much was my wife cheating on me? She was speaking to his best buddy when he claimed that she had drunkenly flirted with 2 of her coworkers at the next corporate party, in addition to the fact that she frequently has meetings with his ex in the exact automobile I got her for her birthday. I was practically on the ground there. It turns out that she had been cheating on me virtually nonstop and I, being stupid and brainless, had not even caught her. Now though, I was certain about my wife. What to do with her at this point was the only crucial decision I had to make. Living with her wasn't something I wanted. To induce regret in her for her actions. I could carry it out. I made the decision to come up with a plan of action. I'll start dancing her now. The next day, I took the day off work and traveled to a nearby small town to visit the father of my wife. I want to give you some background information about this individual. He had spent practically his whole life serving his nation as a retired colonel. These are not simply hollow words. This is a genuine guy who sacrificed everything for the benefit of his country. I encountered him pretty frequently, and we frequently went to him in the bath when I was caring for his daughter, who would later become my wife. I treated her badly both times I spoke to her. The colonel probably believed he had given his daughter in marriage to a virgin, since he barely ever allowed her to leave the house. She only had activities at school and home. I suppose that's why when she married me, she went all out and went out with everyone else. I thus made the decision to exact this exact retaliation. I was well aware that my wife's father would probably just kill my wife if he learned what his cherished daughter had done. Of course, I may be exaggerating, but he would have likely done the same if she had been present when I informed him. The colonel first stumbled, and for a few moments I even worried a bit about his health because of how old he was. But it turned out that the soldier was a tough guy. He poured himself a drink of vodka and quickly drained it while turning to face me. Then he stealthily rose up and stumbled into the next room after repeating the same technique twice more. I then understood that I needed to go back. The essential information had been sent to the intended recipient, and now that I had forced my wife out of the family home, repercussions were certain to follow. Thankfully, we hadn't started a family yet. I quietly sat in the driver's seat and headed to the home. Right first, I want to reassure everyone that nothing dreadful or heinous occurred to my wife. When I got home, I collected all of my ex-wife's belongings in a cool-headed manner and calmly threw them out the door. I should make mention of the significant fact that my wife was observing everything I did. Even so, she did not move. She was able to decipher everything from my icy gaze. I didn't cause a big controversy, since I knew very well that my wife cared more about the financial values I could provide for her than about me. But just now, everything would vanish from her in a second. After all, I, a licensed attorney, had taken the trouble to draft a prenuptial agreement, and my wife would now be without all she had been enjoying so safely for the previous several years. The actual and most heinous kind of punishment for her is that. Finally, a year later, I ran into a friend of my ex-girlfriend and casually asked about her well-being. She said that her father had discontinued all communication and thrown her out of the house. She currently resides outside of her hometown with a man she has a common-law marriage to. They lead relatively simple lives, some could even say separate ones. My ex-wife frequently writes on social media about how I wrecked her entire life and how I was such a jerk. For more than 20 years, my wife and I had shared a home. 6 months ago, we had our anniversary. Our recently married 21-year-old daughter got us a brand new contemporary TV set as a gift for this occasion. Our family was never wealthy, but we always had enough money. My wife, a writer by trade, occasionally goes to other cities on business, which provides the family with a substantial one-time income. Together, we both make decent money. Of course, I wish she didn't have a job at all, but she enjoys writing articles and interacting with new people so much that she doesn't want to quit her job. By the way, I was the one who started her employment at the previous job, since the manager of the magazine where my wife currently works is a longtime friend of mine. Up until a certain point, I was generally content. My wife informed me one evening, I can't remember when exactly, a month or two ago, that she was traveling to a nearby town to interview a rock star who was due to perform. I was a little disappointed, since I planned to spend the next evening with her alone, but my wife was so thrilled to tell me about the trip's plans that I couldn't help but grin and give her a beautiful kiss. I wished her well and a safe journey. She came back 3 days later. Her actions were peculiar in some way. I questioned her numerous times about her health and her ability to carry out her intentions. In any case, how went the interview? In response to all of my inquiries, she grinned at me bewilderedly and assured me that everything was okay. Even though I had no more questions, something inside of me kept me up at night like a creaky cat, and there was a reason, it turned out. Soon after, I received a call from an old buddy who had assisted in getting my wife a job and invited me to the bar. I affirmed. It had been a while since we had our last drink together. We met and had a casual conversation about something at the time specified in the contract on the spot, but things continued to get worse. My friend offered me a drink or two and then launched into a monologue, saying, "Buddy, I have something to tell you. Just pledge to exercise self-control, the worry." I nodded. Igor revealed to me information that I could only have imagined in my darkest nightmare. My wife had betrayed me when I was on my most recent work trip. The offender stated it after becoming wasted during an interview with a music star. My friend removed the video from the changing area. I regret seeing the tape. My fury, bitterness, and rage knew no bounds. My wife naturally noticed my condition when I arrived home. When she realized what had happened, she almost fell to her knees and started to apologize and give me reasons. My pain was severe. How does one forgive such an act? And earlier, we were really content. In response to her cries for mercy, I remained silent. I didn't say a word as I quietly left the flat. The next day, I went to my daughter's place to sleep so as not to disturb her and her husband. I behaved deliriously for the next 24 hours. I can't recall how I completed work-related reports, reached her, or returned. I came late at my home. My daughter and son, along with the rest of my family, were there and waiting for me. They voiced their thoughts on the mother's genuineness and regret. The cheater also promised to resign from her position and show me that she was truly sorry for her error and was unable to forgive herself. She pleaded with me not to divorce her. I kept quiet while I listened to them. And I was even relieved that my kids had the good sense to retain their fond feelings for both the guilty parent and me as a parent. But I'm unable to pardon my wife. I keep seeing the horrible videos picture. I understand that I will never be able to sleep with my wife again. That concludes the tale of our hero. Comment with your thoughts and don't forget to subscribe and like. You have a lot of wonderful stories to read. Additionally, you can send me your original life stories, which I will share. And as usual, I send my best wishes your way. And best wishes. I appreciate your attention. The next story is about a husband coming home early in the morning and seeing his wife naked on her lover. Sometimes people decide on the spot who don't expect this from themselves. And the results are sometimes shocking and sometimes hilarious. In this case, the cheating spouse ended up doing just fine. And the cheating spouse was left with nothing. After stories like this, you really start to believe in karma or divine providence. Who's to say? It all started when Vadim on the social networking news saw the publication of a confession of a certain girl whom he accepted as a friend a few months ago at her request. The gist of it came down to her having an affair on the side. And she, appropriately enough, was married. She asked for advice on what to do about her husband and her lover. She loves her husband, but has an irresistible craving for a new partner. This craving is exclusively animal in nature. Desire for sex with a man after his apparent sex with her husband is not one at all. But at the same time, there is no mental craving for a new partner. That is why she is ashamed in front of her husband. And she cannot stop. Vadim wrote a comment that she has to make a choice at any rate or tell her husband everything about her inability to stop. If he knew then that he was really giving advice to his own wife. But there must have been a bite because he got a chill inside of him after he posted it. Suddenly, he thought about his relationship with his wife and realized how estranged they had become in the last couple of months. He also wondered specifically about his wife. She was getting a little rambunctious. Vadim decided to talk to his wife, discuss their lives, and do it in a positive atmosphere. A couple of days later, he took the afternoon off from work and bought a bouquet of flowers, champagne, and drove home. His wife works in the network and promotes social networking accounts. Naturally, he wanted to surprise her in this way. But not every husband is as lucky as he is. He saw his wife live in bed with another man in the process. She was on top of him in a pose on the stairs. I don't know about Vadim, but I certainly wouldn't have reacted the way he did. They were engrossed in the act of merging, didn't notice his arrival. Vadim went into the hall, took his camera, and spied some pictures. Then he left the house. He walked aimlessly around the city, coming to his senses. Thoughts of revenge ran through his head. He imagined all sorts of ways to humiliate his wife. But after walking around for a few hours, the fuse had passed. Vadim firmly decided not to clarify the relationship, just to post pictures on Facebook, thus alerting his wife. Of course, this surprise was not without revenge. All mutual acquaintances saw the Pico picture. The wife was shocked. A husband who would not accept his wife's lies. That's how he titled his post. While posting a series of pictures of adultery on Facebook, he also wrote, "When you came home to cuddle your wife and find another man in bed with your beloved, something inside forever dies. Good men deserve good women. Goodbye, Alice." Facebook users then erupted. The vast majority stood up in support of the guy's despicable wife. Everyone wrote to him, "You're too good for her." Subsequently, I wrote to him to find out how their situation was resolved. He narrated that they were divorced. And his wife also told him that she had made that post about cheating on her husband under a different account. She told him about it, wanting to soften her guilt. Like she was agonizing, actually asking him to forgive her. But when he told her that he decided to surprise her under the influence of that publication, she regretted writing it. But as they say, that's karma in action. And the deans, when my wife, 36, and I, 30, met, she told me she had epilepsy and would occasionally have seizures. She managed them pretty well, but sometimes it still happened. I wasn't too worried and continued dating her. We were together for 5 years before she had a seizure in my presence. It was terrifying. All I wanted to do was stop it for her, but I couldn't. I did everything I learned to do for her, and when it finally stopped and she came to, I was relieved. We were married that same year. Fast forward 11 years. She had seizures a little more often, about twice a year. Every time she had one, she told me she realized how fragile life was as she knew it. It was all dependent on her brain's health, which she couldn't control. She still worked, and I worried about her. One day, out of the blue, she tells me she wants to work more hours. I tried to tell her we didn't need more income, and I appreciated the time she spent at home with me and our pets. She wasn't convinced. She said she needed to dedicate her time to something, and she was passionate about crafts and wanted to earn more money. She already got a discount at the store, so more money meant she could buy more craft supplies. I finally gave in. I got the idea that she wasn't going to let this go, so instead of coming home at 2, she started coming home anywhere between 5 and 8. It was odd to me that even when I asked her to keep her schedule consistent and give it to me in advance, she never did. She said they'd change her hours even after printing them out. This was frustrating, and I'd spend a lot of nights alone with dinner ready, wondering if she was going to be home soon. I finally got tired of it and asked her to fully quit. She obviously said no and added that she was enjoying herself. I told her I wasn't and at least wanted to know when she'd be home each night. When her behavior continued anyway, I accepted defeat for a while, just until I noticed that her paychecks didn't increase very much at all. We had a joint bank account and her direct deposit was still happening, but it was as if she only took another 2 hours a week. This was the last straw. I installed a spying app on her phone while she slept. When she went to work the next day, I was going to know if she went anywhere else before coming home. Sure enough, she went to an address I had never seen before in some random neighborhood. When she got home an hour and a half later, I couldn't contain myself anymore and I confronted her. She laughed a soft chuckle and told me she just took her friend home from work, and afterward they watched a few episodes of a show. She apologized for not letting me know and said she wouldn't go anywhere else after work again. I was surprised she was so calm and had a reasonable explanation for going somewhere else. I asked why her paychecks didn't go up, and she was still totally calm while she said it was because I was right about us not needing that much more money. So, she upped the percentage of retirement money they took out of her pay. I was almost convinced. I apologized to her for being suspicious, but she said she understood why. We made love and it was perfect. The next night, after she came home from work on time, she had a seizure. I gave her the medicine she needed, wiped the drool off her face, moved her hair behind her ear, and got her a pillow. She was pretty groggy and typed out a text on her phone. She dropped it on the floor next to her, and I happened to be able to see it. The message she just sent said, "I love you." Had to say it before it's too late. It instantly felt like I was floating without a body. I was in shock. The person she sent it to was programmed as Christy. My mouth started to dry, and I felt like I was going to choke on my own tongue. I actually gagged. My wife looked at me, starting to realize I was acting weird. I reached down to pick up her phone, and she grabbed it before me, asking me what I was doing. I told her I just saw her messages with Christy, and needed to know what was going on behind my back. She looked like a deer in headlights. She couldn't believe she'd been so careless, and threw her phone on the floor without turning off the screen. She tried to talk, but all that came out were squeaks and stuttering. I screamed at the top of my lungs for her to tell me. She jumped out of her skin and started shaking. She said she was hanging out with a girl named Christy after work every night. She thought at first they were just really good friends, but she realized it was really difficult for her to even stand one night apart from her. She was falling in love with Christy, and wanted to keep seeing her. I jumped off the couch, and started pacing while I asked her more questions. Now that she met Christy, she felt like she was always meant to be with her, and I was just a placeholder in her life. I was completely shaken, and didn't know what I needed to say anymore. It was like nothing mattered at all, but I was mad. It felt like the emotional equivalent of trying to catch falling sand with your hands. It was frustrating, if not impossible, and why did it matter anyway? I immediately went to pack. I couldn't stay here, even if she was willing to leave. We were renting the house, so I figured I could find a different place to rent soon enough. My wife apologized to me, but it didn't seem sincere. She actually seemed amused, even though she was trying hard not to look that way. I went to stay at my brother's house. My ex was pretty happy for the first 3 weeks. She probably had Christy over a lot, maybe even for the whole time, but then beautiful consequences started to happen. Christy was a shift supervisor at their workplace, and she wasn't supposed to be in a relationship with any coworkers. When they transferred her to another store in a different town, it was more logical for her to move closer to it. When Christy left my ex's apartment, she told her their relationship was over. Short flame, if I ever saw one. My wife cried herself to sleep every night, leaving me extremely long voicemails that I never listened to all the way the divorce was final around the time my wife was evicted from our old place. She didn't work enough hours to pay the bills alone, and they didn't want her to work more hours. She stayed at a cheap motel for a week until she left town. She didn't tell me where she was going, just that she felt like the biggest fool in the world. She said she knew she had to go through this hard lesson of humility and accept fault for ruining our marriage. At least she learned something. I mean, I'd hoped she would never do something so stupid ever again, but what she did to me she couldn't take back. I found a place to rent and adopted a raccoon. He's awesome, and I've started seeing a nice girl, but we've only had one date. I am learning and accepting to live on my own for a while until I know for sure I'm ready to commit to someone permanently again. Wow, OP, you have been through a hellish relationship trauma. Make sure you always have emotional support people to confide in, and know for a fact that not all spouses would behave dishonorably. There are people who need a lot of self-growth, people who have moderately self-grown, and people who are rare, who have learned that people never stop growing, learning, and changing. To make foolish decisions is to be unaware or careless of what's truly important and honorable in life, the values that could bring true happiness and contentment into any relationship. Be humble, honorable, selfless, accepting of change, and communicative. Half of communication is listening, so always remember to take time to listen with interest to your spouse's words. They want you to know something, and they could be talking to anyone else in the world. You are their partner, and you influence their quality of life. Thank you for sharing your story with us. Now let's get into today's second story. My wife, 24, and I, 26, married for 5 years without any problems. The problems started with her sudden onset of insomnia. Nothing changed in our life. We still lived in the same home, and both still worked the same jobs. She would get home from work a little before me, but instead of coming home to a ready dinner made for the two of us, I came home to her on her phone laying in bed. She said she already ate and stayed on her phone doing whatever. We had a 2-year-old at this point. She would usually be playing beside her in the bed, but I started to wonder if my wife was even paying attention to her daughter any more than a babysitter. She started taking walks in the middle of the night while I was sleeping. I woke up and saw she was gone from our bed, so I checked our baby's room, then downstairs, then opened the front door to see if the car was gone. I open it and find her standing there about to come back into the house. She didn't have her keys in her hand and was still wearing her pajamas, so I believed her when she said she couldn't sleep and needed to get some air. Our neighborhood was safe, but I did ask her to try to stay in the house from now on. She didn't. It was several nights in a row that I would stir just as my wife was getting back into bed from God knows where. As I fell asleep each night, she was on her phone. I finally had enough. I asked her to let me see her phone one night, just before I fell asleep. She was stunned by my request and said she didn't need to give me her phone. I said if she was a good, loyal wife, there wouldn't be any problem. She was really upset with me now. She said I didn't trust her and she didn't have to stand for this. Before I could stop her, she locked herself in the bathroom with her phone. I thought I heard whispering, but if she did try to call, it was only for a few seconds. Then she came out and threw her phone at me, telling me I could look at it all I wanted, because she cleaned off all the evidence. I told her I wasn't the idiot she thought I was, and I knew something was going on. I said if she didn't stop all the odd behavior, I would hire a PI to follow her around. She gasped and said we couldn't afford that. It could be worth the investment, I told her. Not even 1 week later, I saw an Amazon charge on her account for 2 manly type gifts. I think maybe, although doubtful, she bought me apology presents. I waited 2 days and found that the packages were delivered, but my wife hid them away. Before we went to bed that night, I saw charges from gas stations over the past month that we normally wouldn't drive to. She was definitely going somewhere after work, in the middle of the night and possibly during the day, when I'd assumed she was working. I stayed awake in bed, waiting for her to leave like she always did. I didn't think it would be so easy to pretend to be asleep until 2:45 a.m. That's when she very slowly and quietly got out of bed. I watched her from the upstairs window as she got in her car and drove away. I went downstairs to look for any clues she might have left behind. I noticed I forgot to open the phone bill, and something told me to. For some reason, this time, they included a list of outgoing calls from my wife's cell phone. 233 calls, in that month alone, to a specific phone number. I called it from my cell. A man answered, wide awake, asking who this was. I told him my first name and asked if he was expecting a young woman, my wife's name, to arrive at his house in a few moments. He said yes, then asked how I knew that. I told him she was my wife, and I was pretending to sleep in bed until she left the house. He was speechless. He said the woman he was seeing wasn't married. Just as he said this, I saw my wife's wedding rings by the kitchen sink. I told him if she brought him the 2 items I saw on the Amazon order, she was my wife, and he was her AP. He said if it was true, he would dump her at the same time as me. He said he was getting too old to be playing games and thought she was a serious, respectable woman. I said if she's guilty of who I think she is, she's not who he thought. My wife arrived there while he was on the phone with me. He just set down the phone. I could hear her greet him like he was her lover. Then I heard her say she had 2 surprises for him. He gasped in a scared way when he saw the items were the same ones I mentioned. He wasted no time and told her he had her husband on the phone right now. He handed her the phone, and I said, "Hey honey, we're over." She squeaked and started crying against her will. She tried to say there was a misunderstanding, but we both waited, with me on speaker, for her to give an explanation, and she didn't know what to say. She tried saying she was planning to divorce me, which is why she started seeing this guy. I asked her if she told her AP about our 2-year-old daughter, and she did not. He said he had no idea she was married with a new child. He apologized to me, then broke up with her and kicked her out. She was screaming and crying, really freaking out. I couldn't understand what was happening, but the call was eventually dropped. Since she had a key, I moved the couch and other furniture in front of the doors to stop her from getting in. She tried to call me 13 times while I slept like a baby next to our 2-year-old. I knew I figured out what was going on, and it gave me so much peace I was able to rest well. The next morning, the police showed up. They told me my wife spent the night in the car, because she couldn't get in, even though she lived here. I got the lease, which was in my name. I told them what was going on, and they told her they couldn't force me to let her in, because the place was in my name. She insulted them, asking them what their job was, if not to help people. I was surprised she took it out on them so much. She freaked out about her daughter being inside, and the cops refused to get involved with that as well. She went to her mom's house, 2 hours away. They started figuring out what, if anything, they could do in her defense. Apparently, the evidence I had against her was more than enough to get better favor in the divorce and primary custody of our daughter. My ex had several boyfriends in quick succession, and it just made me extremely thankful that my daughter had a stable home environment with me. She started preschool and is doing great. She still sees her mom. I've started dating someone, but haven't introduced them to my daughter. I'm determined to be her stable father figure without other women coming in and out of our lives. Opie, I am so sorry your wife made those terrible decisions. She never should have started communicating on a regular basis with another man without telling you. You could see the behavior changes, and I think you made the best decisions anyone could have made, given the circumstances. You were patient and communicative, although your wife wasn't. She apparently didn't know what she needed to do to avoid temptation and honor her marriage. Never stop honoring the person you chose to live your romantic life with. They change just as you do, but what should never change is open communication and love. Both are a choice. Don't judge or look down upon your spouse, because chances are, you could be judged just the same. Thank you for sharing this story, OP. I hope you are able to heal from this situation. Thank you all for taking the time to listen to today's stories. If you enjoyed listening, please feel free to like and subscribe if you haven't already. Also, comment below with your thoughts on what happened. Take care.